Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is the owner and president of Leadership Innovations, hailing all the way from Missouri in the United States. His name is Todd Long. Welcome to the show. How you doing, Todd?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
It's a pleasure for having you on the show. Let's just jump straight into things. I'd love to know how you kind of set up your business and the journey from when you began to present day.
Yeah, absolutely. Now it's interesting because I think businesses, at least in my world, my business idea started probably when I was in college. I
Okay.
had this little bit of an impetus, like, oh, this little thing inside me saying, boy, it'd really be cool to have my own business someday. Now, then reality sets in, and you have to get experience and knowledge and wisdom and all those kinds of things. And I would also say that I'm not a extreme risk taker. I'm a moderate risk taker, I would say. And so I think more extreme risk takers probably jump in and like, gosh, let's just dig into this. And I'm more probably a slower risk taker in that process. So I had this idea of I'd love to have my own business. Not really sure what that was. But then got really intrigued by this notion of leadership development, helping people. How do I influence the people around me, but also how do I lead myself? And so that really started to become, I became really curious about that early on in my career. And so as a result of that, then I was like, how can I position myself in different roles, jobs, experiences where I can either learn about leadership development, facilitate, train, teach, do whatever I can to gain and then gain experience around this as well. And so that was probably the beginning of it. And then 12 years ago, this month is when I officially kicked off Leadership Innovations and finally made the leap from full-time employment where you get the check every month, you got the health insurance, you got all those kinds of things, and said, okay, my wife and I said, let's go take this leap of faith. And let's just jump into it. And we figured we had a pretty good support system around us. Our finances were okay. They weren't, it wasn't like we weren't going to go very long without needing some money in the bank. But we said, let's go do this. And if we fall or fail, then hey, we'll learn something and jump from there. And I say my wife and I because she's not necessarily involved in the business, but we have 5 children and we had
Oh,
five
wow.
young children. Yeah, we had 5 young children at the time. And I was the primary person providing income for the family. So yeah.
See, I've had a lot of people on the show that have been in kind of a similar situation as far as like transitioning from, like full-time career to
Yeah.
going for like a business. And it's always a tough decision and there's going to be a lot of considerations to be had. But like, I find that fascinating that you had 5 young children and you got a wife and everything. And you have to like, can you walk us through a little bit that decision-making process and how you guys kind of decided like, okay, this is the right move and this is how we're going to
Yeah.
do it?
Yeah. I'd love to share that story. It's actually, it's a faith journey, really,
Okay.
in terms of our faith, in terms of yeah, it is a faith journey, because I would feel this. So I'll back up a little bit years before that. I would sense this, man, I really want to start my own business. And then there was this like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. And I really like start, wait a minute. There was that sense. And I get that. And I needed and it was a good wait a minute voice from my wife saying, hey, let's make sure we have certain things in order. And I knew it wasn't, and then there was a sense like it isn't quite the right timing. But then I also remember my wife, she gave me, her name's Rebecca, by the way, she gave me a journal probably about 4 years before I launched the business. And she said, I don't want to hold you back from your dreams. And I
Wow.
want you to be able to think about that. So I have this journal that I just started journaling and writing and saying what this might look like and thinking through that. And then 2010, I guess that would be the spring of 2010, I just got that bubbling again. It was stirring in me. And I just felt like this, almost like God's calling me. I have a faith, like my faith tells me, like I just felt this, like God's just calling you to go do this, go make this happen. And what was interesting is Rebecca also was like, man, I think it's time. Like she started saying that. And so I was like, okay, now, and I almost felt like this sense of like, we got to go do this. It was different. And that's the only way I can describe it is it was this sense of like, this is different. You got to go do this and try it on. And so like we said, well, let's go do it. So I turned my resignation in and stepped out and literally like within like probably a week, a connection I had said, hey, we're looking at building this leadership development program at our really large business, and we would like you to be a part of that, helping build that.
This is the weird thing about chasing your dreams, isn't it? Because I've had
Yeah.
somewhat a similar journey in so much as I've in the last couple of years I've gone freelance. So I
Yeah.
was I was always doing marketing. That's my field, at least what I studied at least. And well, but I'll give you a bit of context. So I'm basically trying to become an actor and a voice actor, and obviously trying to do a podcast, a lot of different things, right?
Yeah.
But I studied marketing. That, I was told from a young age, like, you need to get a specialism, you need to get a degree. And for what it's worth, it was a good decision. It did kind of push me away from where I wanted to be, but the irony is everything I do involves marketing, advertising, branding, like you name it. Like, it's just kind of ironic, like, in a sense. But anyway, like, taking that plunge, going from an everyday kind of worker in a day job to freelance was such a big journey for me and a jump for me. And I feel like it's very similar to being a business owner in the sense that, like, you don't have that paycheck guaranteed every month. You don't have, there's less security. I don't want to say that it's completely secure, because it's not, but there is a lot less security because you're constantly seeking that work and pursuing that work. And running a business, I imagine, is quite similar in the sense that, like, you go from project to project. Maybe you have constant, like, regular customers, or maybe it's a project by project basis, like however the model goes. But point is, you're always looking, and it takes time to build, I suppose, the experience, the networks, contacts, etc. But my point is, like, it's taking that initial jump into that sphere, into the unknown is like really tricky. And it's like, I feel like once you do it, though, and this is why I wanted to bring this up, these windows do start opening. Like, I remember there was a particular, like, I was unemployed for quite a long time, unfortunately, because it was a bit of a weird situation where I came back from another country and then COVID hit. And I kind of naively thought, like, oh, I'll get a job easily, like, no problem, right?
Right.
It's like a year and a half later. Then I finally get work, and it was on a freelance basis, which is exactly what I wanted. But it was still kind of working for a company. It wasn't quite exactly what I wanted, but it was at least somewhat on my terms, but it was contract based. And then I realized, like, okay, I need to change this and move this into a situation where I am in full control, and I get to kind of call the shots as far as, like, my time is concerned. And that's what I need in order to facilitate being able to pursue those goals of things like acting and stuff like that, right? Anyway, point is, it's like this process, and it keeps going, and you go from step to step, stage to stage, and every once in a while that feeling comes where you're like, this feels right. Or you have a period of nothing happening, and then suddenly you get a bunch of opportunities. Like, more recently, I shared this on the show, so for anyone who's a regular listener of the show, you already know this story. But in voice acting, I had an opportunity come up, and it was something I'd never done in voice acting before. I met a bunch of people, and that kind of changed my perspective of what the possibilities are in that field as far as work is concerned. And then just in general, the experience, the money that was involved, the experience itself, the connections. And I'm just looking at all this, and I'm like, this is what my life could be. And this is what my life is right now. But we're getting there. And it's almost like there's like signs. It's like there's a feeling that you can't quite explain. If you're religious, maybe it is God, maybe it's a calling, or if you're not religious, maybe it's the universe, or whatever the case may be. But there's like a feeling within of, like, no, I need to push on this and pursue this. And it's just, I know this is a bit of a long-winded story, but
that's all right.
when I'm a storyteller, I love to tell stories. But when I was listening to you talking about that, like, feeling when the right time is, I really resonated with that, because I feel that it's difficult to know exactly when the timing is right, because you get clues. Like, as you said, throughout time, you were kind of saying, like, oh, is this the right time? I got a bit of a feeling. But it's knowing the difference between pulling the trigger when it's time to do so, but also times when you're just feeling like you really want to pursue it, but you're just eager to get started,
Yeah, and there has to be some wisdom, right, in some of those decision makings. It can't be just completely compulsive. It's all emotionally driven. There has to be some other factors in place, right? I had a really strong network of support. I've been in the Kansas City, Missouri area for 20 years, I had a lot of people that I knew, a lot of relationships. So there's a lot of things that had been established and put in place to go take that leap to make it a little bit easier. Back to that moderate risk taker, right? There's some of that's in place. But what's interesting though about having my own business is there's still those ebbs and flows of like, well, do I keep going? Is there time? There's moments like, oh man, like the business is a little bit lower right now and picks up a little bit. And so I totally get that same ebb and flow of things. But what's really fascinating is that, when people, like right now, I've got some steady clients. Like I've established some really strong, steady clients that I work with. I can lose one client and still be in business. If I had one job and was employed by somebody, I lost my one job. I'm out of business. I'm out of work, right? And so it's a different experience of establishing. You actually have in some ways, if the business has been established well, you've got this network of opportunities of work versus just one thing you're doing.
I completely agree. And it was only maybe 3 or 4 years ago that I really fully understood the significance of that. I worked in a few different companies where I saw people that were really good at their jobs, get fired because of just, I don't know, budget cuts, political, whatever, it happens. But point is, your livelihood is just gone, which, it's if you're just a regular person that, doesn't really have any responsibilities, it's not like it's difficult, but it's not really, really, really tough. Whereas if you've got a wife, kids, all these different other things you have to, commitments, things you have to be there for and sustain, like your hand is forced, like you need to get work as soon as possible. But I guess what we're really alluding to is the fact that like the nature of work has changed. Do you know what I mean? Like I look at it like instead of a job, I look at, okay, different revenue sources, different ways of maximizing the potential of making money. Like just as long as you keep that money coming in,
right,
it's okay.
And providing for the lifestyle you want. And hopefully doing things, at least in my case, sounds like your case as well, you're doing things that one, you enjoy and love to do and show some value. Like, is there value in the world that you're providing? And that's the other, those are really important aspects in any of the work that I've done over my career is, do I enjoy it, love it? Am I compelled to go do that? And is it providing valued in some way to some people around us as opposed to other work, which is important, right? I mean, and some people, and most people obviously are not compelled to go start their own business, and we need people to work for businesses. And if people decided, hey, I'm not hiring Todd anymore to do work, and I got to go find another job and figure out something else as another revenue source, whether that whatever that might be to provide for my family, I'll go do that. That's because that's the responsibility that you have to go take care of things. So
for me, it was a kind of a twofold understanding thing, in that I had to learn that I'm a certain type of person, but I also had to learn, how jobs and the world works, because it's changed. Like it's not really realistically, you can't go and work for a company for like 20, 30 odd years now. If you do pursue the corporate environment or any kind of job, really, you're kind of expected to move between companies or between positions or whatever, like that. You're always expected to continue moving forward. It's rare that you can find a role where you can just kind of sit and just collect your paycheck and that's great, but you're right, like different types of people require different things, and I think that's kind of key. Like I for me, it was a realization of sitting in a job that was paying fairly reasonably well at the time that I got it, and I was getting the experience I needed, and the job was easy, and I was like, what do I really have to complain about here? I felt bad about feeling that way, but then it was like, no, I just have to do this freelance thing and pursue these goals that I have, because that's the only way I'll be happy. Which is very deep, but like that's the reality. But
no, I get that. The contentment or joy or happiness in life, and that the tension between that and responsibility. Like as a human being, I need to at least take care of, at least hopefully as I'm maturing, at least if you're single or whatever, you got to take care of yourself, at least to provide for yourself, or if you've got other people in your life that you're providing for, to take care of them and do what's right there. So there's a tension in that you got to wrestle with a little bit.
I think it's just about like exercising like self-discipline. Like a lot of people that I've spoken to that talk about, like, oh, I could never do that, or they're wondering like, how would you get into that? And they say like, I would find it difficult to discipline oneself. And I think like one of the things you were talking about is if you lose a project and you'll be okay, there'll still be money coming in. And I think that kind of comes down to being able to manage your money effectively, but
True.
also being able to plan it out. Like
Yep.
recently, I've had to
Absolutely.
completely change the way I approach this, and I'm
Yeah.
still learning. And it's a bit like, okay, this is just a different way of doing things. So for instance, when someone goes, "Oh, when's payday for you?" and it's like, "Well, that kind of varies. Like, it's when the client
Right.
pays."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's an important. Well, it's important to realize. I think for anyone listening to this who's
Yeah.
either in work or maybe you're looking to get into work or in between jobs, whatever the case may be. I think if you take away anything, it should be that you've got different options and different paths. There isn't only one way to do this,
That's good.
one way to make money, especially these days with the advent of the
Oh,
internet and everything else.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Keeping your options open. And I think that's anytime we get stuck, like this is the only answer we have. And we think that's the only answer, which is not true. That's never true. But when we get stuck and then we think this is the only answer, then we limit ourselves completely as it goes. There's lots of options. I mean, there's always lots of options.
When you were talking about ebbs and flows, like that's again something I resonate with too, because I find, for instance, I do a lot of freelance writing, right?
Yeah.
And I'll get times where I'll have a client for ages, it's going really well, and then suddenly they just go cold, never hear from them again,
Yeah.
or I don't know, like it just they don't really need you anymore, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And then you get a period where you're like, okay, where am I going to find work? What am I going to do? And then like a week later, maybe even a day later, suddenly it changes.
Yep.
I love that
Yeah.
excitement as well, because every day,
Yeah.
especially in my life right now, every day is different. Either one
Yeah.
day's not so positive, the next day it's really positive, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, okay, well, I guess the key is to just keep being consistent in your efforts every day, but then as soon as you get an opportunity, jump on it.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. I think that consistency, what at least I found for myself, is just keep running the long race and being consistent. What you know how to do, you do really well. Trust in the process. Be disciplined. For me, I'm disciplined about I have my work hours. I have the things that I have to accomplish. I have my clear goals I'm trying to accomplish in terms of both, reaching out from a marketing standpoint, relationship building standpoint, from a delivery standpoint, from a creation standpoint, those kinds of things. So, and then constantly getting feedback from my clients of how can I get better? Keep improving. I want to get better and better as well.
How do you tackle that aspect? Because I admire that. I kind of try to adhere to that as much as possible too. Like this idea that there are like set hours you're available, and you just get back to people when you're free. But some
Yeah.
people maybe don't necessarily appreciate that, or maybe they see it a bit differently. Do you ever face kind of clashes on that? Like how do you kind of deal with differences of opinion? Yes, say on in terms of being able to be reached throughout the day.
Yeah. So this is what works for me. And I suppose that's probably what you got to find what works for yourself and kind of your flow of life and your day and those kinds of things. Like I know some people that they can work in the night evening hours and that's kind of their best time, prime time. There you go, right? For yourself, right? That's you. Right? For me, I'm a morning person. So if I get up and I, go through my routines in the morning where I get my exercise, I have my breakfast and I get to work, that works for me. And so I can get my, primary work. I know in the morning hours, I'm going to be putting forth certain effort. Afternoon hours, I know that I'm not going to be probably as focused, as productive. So I have to align my work to that the best that I can. But as long as I'm consistent in that's for me, that works in terms of that. Now, I'd also go back to this is I also have a clear, I call it my blueprint for work. And so I've established like here are the goals that I'm trying to accomplish this year. And I'm really clear about, okay, I know I have to accomplish certain things or do certain things to keep the business going. And so I set up goals around that for myself, and I check back in with those goals to make sure I'm achieving those goals. So, for example, just as simple as posting on LinkedIn. Or,
Okay.
a simple goal of that. Like I'm going to post on LinkedIn X number of times per week, and I'm going to go check that out just to continue to connect with people that way. Or I'm going to establish coffee conversations with people. I'm going to check in with clients on a consistent basis. I'm going to follow up and do those things. So I've got these specific goals that I have in mind that I'm trying to accomplish. And that was partly part of this is like writing a book. I had a goal of writing a book and finally finished it this last year. And so that was like, hey, I gotta be consistent with that. So there is the tangible aspect of going, okay, what are what's my clear direction, what are the clear things I'm trying to accomplish, and then having the discipline enough to go back to doing those things. And saying that, I also have flexibility and freedom. I know, like if I get a call and I got to take my kid to someplace or do this or have to change at certain days, I can do that and adjust my work schedule to make that happen. But I still know I need to get these things accomplished.
So one aspect of what you're saying is that because you're able to be flexible with yourself and your own commitments, you're able to kind of extend that to clients too within reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, to be honest, I mean, my work is not urgent work.
Okay.
I'm not in charge of an IT department where I have to have 24-hour observation. The thing goes down, and then everybody gets on call and has to fix that. Right? People aren't calling me like, Todd, I got this leadership issue. I got to solve it in 10 minutes. You got to fix it right now. Like that doesn't happen. Like,
is that not what crisis management is then? No?
Right. Maybe I could offer that as a solution, like, on-call crisis leadership moment. But most of the things I'm doing are prepare. Like I'm thinking about them weeks or months in advance and preparing for that client. Now there are deadlines I have to get to that client and commitments that I've made in terms of things that I need to get to them in order to do the workshop or the retreat or the coaching session that I'm doing. So there are things that I have to get it, but it's not, but I don't, mostly in my life, I don't have an urgency like some people's work it feels like it's constant urgency because of the nature of the work.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you talk about that in general. Like I feel that the world just kind of operates in that way now, that even while the business itself might not be urgent, there is almost sometimes an expectation from clients, people. Like, for instance, I've had instances where people have been like, have you seen this yet? And I'll get like I have seen it. They don't know that I've seen it yet, but I have. I'm taking my time because I like to do things like emails, just something simple. Right. Sometimes I see like a stack of emails, and I just look at it like, I'm not in the right headspace to do that right now. But I know I will be, and when I get that moment, I will go through all of those, and I'll take the time, and I'll really make an effort of it.
Yeah.
But sometimes other people just expect you to kind of just be like reachable at all times, and I just
I refuse to play that game. I don't want to play that game. I totally get what you're saying though. I think there's an urge because our tools of communication, we can text, we can Snapchat, we can do whatever tool it is to communicate quickly to people, and there seems to be this sense of urgency around everything, and it's just not true. For the most part, most of the stuff is just frivolous, not really urgent.
It's easy to forget. Like I messaged someone the other day about some work, and I realized the time, and and she was just talking normally, and I just sort of said like, "Oh, hey, by the way, like, sorry, I just realized it's really late. This is probably really inappropriate." She's like, "No, it's fine. Don't worry." But I still feel bad because it's like, no, this isn't cool. I should save this and do this at a reasonable hour and stuff. But,
yeah. Well, there's two things that come to my mind just as we think about leading ourselves. When you think about that, two things is one is recognizing the things that are coming at me. Are they truly urgent or not urgent? And how important are they or how unimportant are they? And as we think through kind of that lens, there's this lens that looks through that. Are we really focusing our time on things that are important and not urgent? And that's where I try to live my life. Like I'm going to try to do things that are important, but they're not urgent, and I'm going to do them with quality and the best that I can. Now, sometimes we get things that are urgent and important that you got to go take care of, but I don't want to spend my time doing things that are urgent and unimportant. And I feel like so much of the stuff that comes at us these days is really urgent and not important. And so then if we can eliminate as much of our time doing those things, then we can spend more of our time doing things that are important and not urgent. So that's one thing that comes to my mind. I had a second thing and I totally lost it now, so it may come back in a minute. But I think that's important to recognize just leading ourselves and what are the things that are coming at us. And then maybe the second thing is we can decide what I say game we're playing or what we're going to do. Like what are our habits in terms of working? And for us, that makes sense. Like I said, if it works for you to work in the evening and that's a prime time for you to work, and that's great, right? And other people know that and don't have the expectations. Like I'm not going to, like people know, but most people know I'm working with them. I'm not going to respond to emails at night. I set my boundaries. And it's like that's just not going to happen most of the time. So. Yeah.
It's good. I just always find it interesting to learn
Yeah.
how different business leaders deal with these things because
Yeah.
it's an interesting one, and everyone looks at it differently. Like
Yeah.
I personally,
Yeah.
like I'll be able to work in the morning and the evening, but
Yeah.
sometimes I find like the middle hours of the day, I'm kind of useless for some reason.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I
but
completely understand
yeah,
that.
and I don't know why. It's just like between the hours of about 2 to 4, I'm just like, ugh. And
Yeah.
then after that, suddenly wide awake, really into it, ready to do stuff.
Yeah.
And same
Yeah.
first thing in the morning. I feel like it's a great time to get things done, but
Yeah.
it's weird.
Well, and
Very
it's fine. It is finding what works for you. Like this is what works for me. There's not a template for any of that. It's like what works for you as you lead and I go back to leading yourself. How do you lead yourself well and navigate that now? Now, if you're responsible for other human beings that you're managing, it's also being really clear. Like I've seen this problem is there's certain people that are really driven and like they're doing emails at night, they're sending it out. So their associates that report to them feel that same pressure. Like, oh, my boss wants me to reply to me tonight. Well, I've got these social activities I'm doing. I'm constantly on my phone. It feels like I can't get away from work because I feel like my boss is always wanting me to respond at night or respond immediately to their messages. Well, and that may or may not be true, but a lot of times we aren't even having the conversation about, hey, what are your expectations when I send you an email at 9 o'clock at night? Is your expectation for me to reply to that immediately, or can I wait till the next day if I'm spending time with my significant people in my life?
What do you think about micromanagement in the workplace? Like, do you think? Well, no, the
Yeah,
reason,
yeah,
yeah, because I know it's a controversial term and stuff like that, but like, there are people out there that do believe that following up on these things, pushing talking to your staff in a certain way might be effective. And while you were
yeah,
talking there, it kind of just reminded me of that. And over the years, I felt
yeah,
that I've always done my best work when I've been able to have some degree of autonomy and just kind of just get things done.
yeah,
But then sometimes if you confront people about this, they'll say, "Well, I'm just trying to get an update. I need to know. I'm following up on this." But I actually find it quite disruptive. But what are
yeah.
your thoughts in general, the good and the bad?
Yeah. So there's a 10-year period of my life where I oversaw an outdoor ropes course, challenge course, which is basically, I don't know if you're familiar with that industry, but it's these outdoor challenges and activities. You bring people, usually students and youth through, sometimes adults, do these team building challenges and activities. So I had about 30 to 40 staff that I had to train up and help run this facility because we had hundreds of kids that would come and participants come throughout the year. And so my belief was I wanted to train up the facilitators, the staff that I have, so I could give them the keys and they could run with it. Like that was my ultimate goal. I wanted to be in a place where I don't really have to be here and this thing's going to run smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
So now to get there, to get our staff to that point that they could do that with me saying, hey, here's the group, here's the time, here's all you need to do. There's a training process and a little bit of, I don't know if it's micromanagement, but it's a closer training and a closer observation and a closer experience with them until they have the abilities and the motivation to go do that themselves. Once they have the abilities and motivation to go do that themselves, then it's like, well, here's the keys, run with it. I'll be here to coach you, check in. I'm here to support you, but in that particular task, you can go run with it. And I think that's the mistake we oftentimes make is if somebody has experienced at something and has the motivation and skill sets, hey, run with it. But now if somebody doesn't have that, like if they don't have the skills and motivation, then I probably need to be a little bit closer to them and help them through that process a little bit closer. Now, whether you call that micromanagement or just closer observation to help support somebody to get to that point.
See, see, that's the thing. What you laid out there, to me, that just sounds like training someone for getting them to a management position or a supervisory position, which you would expect, you would want even them to be a
Right.
bit more, your manager, sorry, to be a bit more hands-on with you and teach you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas I don't know, I feel like micromanagement more tends to be like a lack of trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like when I've experienced it in the workplace, it'll be something like, okay, here's a project. I need you to do, let's say, I need you to write me these articles and do a bit of editing, and I need
Right.
it done
Right.
by Wednesday this week. Okay,
Yeah.
let's say it's Monday, right? And then I'm more explaining this for the audience. I know what you know what
Yeah. Yeah.
micromanagement is, but
That's
for those who
good.
don't know, so I just realized what I said. It's like, anyway,
That's all right.
um,
That's good. Mm.
so like you go through that process of delivering that work to them, and then normally you would just walk away and be like, okay, that, I'll come back to you when it's done kind of thing. But I find in my experience, it's always like a couple of hours later, it's like, so how's it going? And to me, so how's it
Right.
going doesn't mean, oh, so how's it going? Do you need any help? Like, how can I be of assistance? So how's it going means, why isn't it done yet?
Mm, right. Right.
What do we have a problem? It's just like
Yeah. Yeah.
this kind of,
You feel this pressure, this force,
yeah.
this coercion, maybe, if you will, around that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I think maybe micromanagement possibly could be a useful thing if you have someone who's not motivated or doesn't want to work. But then if they're not motivated and they don't want to work, then why are they employed? Like, I mean,
Exactly.
you can attempt to try and get that out of them. I'm not saying like give up
Yeah.
on people, but if someone doesn't want to be there, then
Right.
find someone who does want to be there. It's like, I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it goes back to, where do you give people freedom? People that
right.
want freedom or need freedom to go execute their jobs without feelings like somebody's kind of overseeing them too much, that keeps them from doing it well. And then going back to your example, it's like, are there clear expectations about when you want the project finished? Like, if this is done, I'd like this done by tomorrow at noon. They've clearly said that. You understand that. They don't need to check in until, if it's not done by tomorrow at noon, then you have the freedom to come check with me. Or I need to communicate back to you if I'm not going to get it done by noon tomorrow, or whatever the dates are on it. So oftentimes what we don't do is set clear expectations about when we want things done, and then we don't have to worry about the micromanagement thing. Now, I get, like, if you're a control person, and even though you set those things and you keep trying to come back and interfere in that, then that's something, if you're considered a leader or manager, you need to work on that. Like, you need to get rid of that. Yeah, and be able to let go of some of those things and allow people to have some freedom.
Other than micromanagement, what do you think are
Yeah.
the biggest mistakes that leaders are making in general?
Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah, actually, you know what? This is basics, but I hear this consistently. Is well, it's kind of connected to two parts. Is one is building a respected relationship with the people that you're working with. So if I'm a manager, if I have a title and a position of leadership, building those respected, trusted relationships with you and the associates, but also among the associates themselves, of creating that relationship. So building that trust, that relationship, and then also connected to that is doing consistent formal conversations. And I know this kind of I don't know if it contradicts the micromanagement, but how do I check in on a consistent basis, whether it's once a week or once every 2 weeks, but some consistency where I'm saying, hey, what are you working on? How can I help you work on that? Here are the expectations we have. How can I help you grow and develop? Hey, I want to praise you and encourage you in this way. And having those kinds of consistent things, just to check in. Now, each individual you're working with, they might need it once a week, they might need it twice a week, once a month. But what's that consistency to help them grow? And I hear that quite frequently in organizations. It's like, hey, we're not spending the time to build a relationship and have consistent conversations to help that person do their work and continue to grow, develop well. And that's a discipline of going, okay, we're going to do this and do them well. Also have those conversations well. So
Yeah,
I see that. Yeah.
it's interesting. I was just listening to your different points then, and one of them that stood out to me was the fact that you're praising people for
Yeah.
their work.
Yeah.
I could probably count on my fingers how many times I actually received genuine compliments from a manager, just saying, like, "Hey, well done, good job, like that was really
Right.
good."
Yeah.
I mean, I get.
Sad, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I guess
That was sad.
I guess
Yeah.
the thought process normally is no news is good news kind of thing. Like,
Maybe.
if you
Yeah.
don't hear anything, then it means you're doing your job well, and if you're hearing
Yeah.
negativity, then you're not. But I don't know. Especially when you join a company, I think it's good to know, like, oh, hey, you did really well, or congrats, or like
Yeah.
well done, or anything, just some
You
positive
need some
reinforcement.
feedback. Well, and I would say even young associates in organizations, if you're new, then there needs to be feedback in terms of even improvement. And I think most people, if you set the expectation of like, hey, my job is to help you get better and provide you feedback and have these conversations for improvement, let's have those. And also, you got to mix in the praise, and you got to mix in the encouragement. You got to mix in the relationship there. Those things have to happen to have healthy work environments and really to get the best out of people. as
I
well.
think you're spot on with the age thing as well. Like I remember when
Yeah.
I was younger, like in certain jobs I really could have done with some more reinforcement from a
Yeah.
self-esteem issue. And to be
Yep.
fair, every person's different. Some people will come in more confident,
Yeah.
some not. But I think as a leader, as a manager, you have to recognize that the people
Yeah.
in your team and the different personalities, and try to kind of cater that leadership to them. So if they need
Yeah.
more, if they are lacking in self-esteem, like pay them those compliments
Yeah.
or give them that kind of reassurance they need.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, that's absolutely. Well, I'm going to do a little plug if that's okay
Go for it,
for my,
please do.
for my performance leadership book,
There we go.
because really it's about inspiring growth in others. I mean, a lot of that concepts in terms of helping people grow and develop I've thought a lot about it and help people go through the process of growing and developing and recognize that there's a lot of people that need help, and we need help to help other people grow through this learning process and make that happen. So I built that down as saying, hey, and this is really about learning. How do you help people grow and learn? And I've defined these 4 phases that people go through in the learning process. And if we can understand where people are in their phases of growth and put language to that, then I, as a leader, can come up underneath somebody and support somebody through those growth phases, whatever they're trying to learn how to do, whether it's playing a musical instrument, writing an article, or creating a marketing campaign, or developing a database, or whatever the task is. If you're learning how to do that, you're going to go through these phases of growth. And how do you help people move through those phases of growth?
Given that
Process.
you've been doing this work for about 12 years now, was it 2010 that you said that you set up the business? Is that
Yeah,
right?
started my business in 2010. I'd say I've been doing leadership development work for about 25 years.
25. Oh wow, yeah, so
Yeah,
it's quite longer
we're
there.
pushing that. Yeah, so so business for 12 years, but this kind of work I've been doing for a little bit longer than that. But yeah.
How would you say approaches to leadership have changed in that time, and where are we at now with regards to what are the popular methods of leadership?
I would say, what's really fascinating is I think the the same styles of leadership I see keep showing up. Like I still see autocratic, kind of domineering leadership continue to manifest itself in lots of different organizations, particularly at higher leadership levels. There's this compulsion or tendency to have this autocratic kind of voice. What I also recognize is that what I think people want is more collaborative voice and input. And I would say, so in terms of what I see out there, I see all styles of leadership. What I think people want and where I lean towards in terms of what I think are the best leadership approaches, if we can have a more of a consensus building collaborative leadership approach, I think you're going to get better results ultimately within organizations. Now, having said that, I get like sometimes there has to be a decision that's made, and sometimes somebody has to make that decision, which becomes more of an autocratic style of leadership that may show up as well. And I also recognize that if you're a leader of an organization and you're responsible for launching a new product, launching a new service, launching something within your organization, you sure as well better know how to facilitate collaborative conversations really well to get those people that are actually executing and putting this stuff together to have input, have buy-in, have ownership, have motivation to go do that. And if all you're doing is barking orders and telling people to get stuff out the door, you're probably going to miss the opportunity to truly lead people. And all you're doing is just, pushing people around and forcing them into, I don't know. Maybe that's it, but just if you want people to engage, there's a sense of how do I get their voice? How do I help them collaborate, be a part of this process?
No, I think it speaks to the fact that there are these different attitudes from companies and managers within certain companies. Like, and I mean, I remember from my time being unemployed when I was
Mm-hmm.
searching for certain jobs, and I would ask employers direct questions like, well,
Yeah.
what do you think about things like remote working? And I remember one time I asked this guy who's the owner of a company, and he was
Yeah.
almost offended by the question and defensive, and said like, no, people love being here, physically being here. And I'm like, do they really? Have you done an office poll? Do you know that? Like, it's
Right.
just a question. But his attitude kind of said to me, and a lot of companies have this attitude of like, we're doing you a favor, like
Mm-hmm.
you working for us, we're doing you a favor. And I just think that like
Mm-hmm.
maybe
Right.
that
Yeah.
was true once upon a time, but the workplace has changed, the employee has changed. Now we're kind of, you're constantly trying to sell yourself, if you think about it. Like once you get kind of 2-3 years into your given profession, now it's, you're in a position where you can kind of start somewhat gambling and kind of going, well, I could go here, I could go here, like you could do consultancy, you can work directly in the field, you can set up your own thing. Like there's different options and different ways of working and styles and stuff. And therefore the employee has more power now. So therefore, I don't feel like there's really any room for that kind of archaic attitude of like, well, you should be grateful for working here, sort of thing. And
Well, I think the best case is there's a mutually beneficial relationship there.
Right.
Like, yes, the employer is providing me an opportunity. They're providing me with training, growth, a paycheck, opportunities to work. If the employer is actually doing that, right? And then the employee is going, I'm offering my services back to the company to help it grow and develop. And it becomes, so if there's this mutually beneficial relationship in that, then that works really well. If it becomes unequal in terms of the employer feeling like, well, I'm doing you a favor, so just show up and get the job done, because we're giving you a paycheck, and that's the only attitude you have, then you're going to miss out. And the reverse is also true. And I've seen this happen where an employee says, well, hey, I'm worth more than you're paying me. And so then they start to leverage. It's like, hey, you need to pay me more or I'm going to leave. And so I get that tactic and I get the negotiation there and I get some of those conversations, but also then it starts to shift. The change is like, I start to then feel more prideful, and I may position myself where I'm not truly trying to benefit the organization and they're not truly trying to benefit me. I'm just negotiating the best salary I can get as possible. So I think there has to be a mutually beneficial relation. That's hard to get sometimes. Right? That's hard. It's hard. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy to get to, but it can be challenging. But I think if you can find that balance, I think then you have a healthy environment.
That demand from employees to kind of ask for more, to say like, I am worth more than this. We started to hear a lot more of that in the media, during COVID, at the height of it, and thereafter. And obviously, I know in the States, and I think this applied in the rest of the world as well, that there was this kind of big surge in people quitting their jobs. Some for more of a statement, but others to kind of say, hey, no, actually, I can do better than this. And, I do deserve more than this. Yeah. Given all of that context, how did leadership change from your perspective as a result of COVID and what it kind of did to the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. It's just like this challenge, this wrestling with virtual versus in person.
Right.
I think that's been part of the big challenge that I've seen organizations wrestle with, of how do we navigate our employees now that want to work in different environments or different homes, and how do we as a company say, hey, this has been a core value of ours for employees to come in, and we've seen benefit in that. That's what we've seen historically, and those two things, there's tension in that. How do I manage that? So I've seen organizations I think most that I'm working for, I think, are finding some hybrid method of that. Now, I get some companies I work for, like I have a distribution manufacturing company I work for. Those employees they can't work from home. They got to get stuff out the door. Like they had to come into the shop. They had to come into the warehouse. There isn't a remote working for a person who has to, move stuff in a warehouse or produce things. That doesn't work in that environment. Now other staff could have that flexibility as well. Now, this is really fascinating. I think companies are finding that hybrid method to try to find employees and make it beneficial for everybody. But I found one organization I'm working with. It's a smaller company, but they're really working hard to create a really engaged culture. Like they're wanting to find people who want to work there. They're finding people that want to do really good work. They're a growing company. They're being productive. They're working with they're doing some really good work. And what's really interesting is they're not required for everybody to necessarily come in, but I'm hearing voices of, I want to come in. I heard like one lady's like, I was talking, she's like, I want to come in there because I like the environment. I like what's happening. I like the collaboration. And so that's a really compelling notion of, are you making an environment that's compelling for people to come into versus not, And I also get then, if you have the flexibility of like, some people, man, if I get heads down and I can be at my home working or some other environment working, and I can be really productive. I think there's some value in that. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your full question. I think people are still wrestling with it, from what I'm seeing, and trying to find the right answers for their employees and the type of work they're doing and the culture that they're trying to create in that. And I also know, like, I facilitate training. Like, I facilitate groups, and I know there's a huge difference between me facilitating a conversation where it's virtual, it's online, and I can do that really well, and I can keep people engaged really well, and I can create a really good learning environment through virtual platforms. There's a whole different experience when I got you in the when we're in the classroom physically together interacting, in that, and there's something different that happens.
As far as all the different clients that you're working
Yeah.
with and all these different businesses,
Yeah.
what's the kind of split as far as like age is concerned, and who are like more receptive to the ideas and who are less receptive? Is there any patterns with that concern or anything you could kind of
This is gonna be very general, stereotypical, possibly. I think there's I love working with like 20-year-olds, 20 to yeah, or 30-year-olds. I love that. But to be honest, I love that audience because they're most of them are like eager, receptive. They want to learn. They want to be a part of something, and I can create an environment where we can engage really well and have a lot of fun and learn a lot, and they can find application. So, saying that, like that 20 to young 30s, I would say I really love that because there's this eagerness about that. If and I'm talking about mostly corporate kinds of
Mhm.
environments that people they want to work, they want to do a good job, they're motivated to do that. So I would say I really enjoy that, as well. As people get into their ways and their grooves and their habits and their patterns, and sometimes as they mature and go through life, there has a tendency to be a little more cynical, unfortunately. And so sometimes it takes a little bit more effort, a little more work on my behalf to get them to open up and to consider maybe what you're doing now doesn't work the way it used to work in the past. Maybe something needs to change a little bit. Now, it becomes a little bit harder, as you know, when you're doing something for a long time to make those changes. And that's just this human nature. The longer we do something, the harder it is to make a change.
That's the thing though, like, and I accepted this years ago, but everything in life is subject to change. And while you do get comfortable, like, you always have to remember that it is going to change and you will have to adapt. Like, no matter what it is, like the
Yeah.
world is always changing, and especially in
Yeah.
the workplace, like it's just,
Yeah.
I know they say that if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but that doesn't really apply when it comes to things like new technologies coming in and replacing old technologies, or just finding more efficient ways of doing things than
Yeah.
previously thought. It's just,
Yeah.
I feel like it's, while it might be people getting stubborn and set in their ways, I think it's also like a fear of change. Like, they're just
Mhm.
people not wanting to embrace it because they're scared of what might come next. But sometimes it can even be better. Sometimes it can be easier,
Yeah. Yeah.
quicker.
Well, and I think that's what you talk about. Like think about moving up in an organization from a standpoint of influence. So you start, in our young career, we've kind of got a job. I've got my little small area of influence. If I do a really good job with that and have some motivation, I might become a supervisor and oversee either projects or people. And if I'm motivated enough and I start to accumulate some skills, I might get a broader scope of people that I get to oversee. And if I'm motivated enough and I'm talking about then organizations, then I might continue to move up. And then I recognize, like, as you become like VPs, directors, overseers of large businesses and companies, the pressure gets stronger and stronger. Like external pressures from if you're if you're owned by a stock, if you have their board of directors, pressures for in terms of making the margins and increasing all those kinds of things, the pressures get really hard, and that pressure then I think causes fear in people, and that fear doesn't allow us to actually be the best we can be in terms of leadership. And so that's the real challenge. So I have a lot of empathy for people who are in positions of leadership that have broad scopes of influence, because there's a lot of pressure on that. It's really hard. It's really hard to do that well without, and maintain some sense of like, I don't know. It's just really hard to do that well, because I think it is because there's a ton of pressure on that we don't quite recognize or empathize with a little bit. And how do we take that pressure off a little bit?
I've seen it in certain managers over the years, and
Yeah.
it's, yeah, like it's it's like, if you think you got it bad with your manager, imagine what your manager's got.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah. No,
but but
it's
but I don't know. Everyone deals with things in different ways. Like,
absolutely.
I've also had managers that have had that pressure but have dealt with it in a positive way. So I suppose
Absolutely.
it's how you deal with these things and
Well, and
move forward.
that goes to me, that goes back to how do you lead yourself well? What good habits do you put in your life? What are your core values? What are the things you're doing to take care of yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, if that's part of your life, to ground yourself, so that those pressures don't overwhelm you, then they cause unintended consequences within the organization or the people you're working with. And to me, there's a lot to be said about how do you lead yourself well. My wife and I are actually talking about a friend of mine this morning he's the executive top level lawyer of a fairly large company. Like, man, that dude's pretty chill. He's pretty calm. Like his life seems in order, and he knows how to lead himself well. There's a guy that doesn't seem to have, I know there's pressures, I know there's challenges. Man, he manages it really well because he's got some core habits in his life, some core foundations, some things that he takes care of himself, so that he doesn't allow that to overwhelm him.
I remember when I was younger, older people would always tell me, like, you need to remain calm in these situations. Like when things seem at their most distraught or, desperate and you don't know what to do and you're panicking, like that's the most important time to be calm. Because in that moment is when you need to like make the right decisions on your next move. And if you obviously react too emotionally, you can make the wrong decision and such. But I think that's kind of, as you say, it's like mastering an art form in a sense. Like once you do that, generally speaking, like you're always going to be okay. Like things will always work out one way or another because there's a solution to every problem. But controlling oneself and not kind of resisting the urge to be scared or fearful or panic, it's hard. It is difficult.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
But it's
absolutely.
possible.
Absolutely. No, fantastic.
So you've worked with people from around the world, from the US, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, India, and Europe. How would you say attitudes and approaches to leadership differ in these nations? Like, is there any particular ones that stand out and clashes and stuff like that?
Wow, that's a really good question. In terms of let me do some contrast and comparison. I'd probably say the group with the people from another country I've worked with the most is from India.
Okay.
I've gotten to travel 7 times, 6, 7 times, do leadership development programs in India. So I've gotten to know, and I wouldn't say great, but at least a little bit the culture. And what I've seen, it was really interesting. Let me see if I can articulate this well. One is the people I worked with in India. I'll say this is just the people I worked with. It's not everybody, but the people I got to work with were highly motivated and compelled to do a really good job. Like, I mean, they were super motivated. Like, and they're engaged. They want to do a good job. They want to, and they're probably very hospitable and caring. All right. So I saw probably a stronger degree of that, and they valued in my work. They valued learning. So when I facilitate a group in India, what I would watch these young leaders that I would be working with at the end of a session, I'd facilitate for a day, and so I do multiple days over a couple of weeks. I would say probably 80% of them would walk up to me, look me in the eyes, and shake my hand and say thank you.
Wow.
In the U.S., I probably get about 10%. And it's not, that's just a different culture. Like our culture doesn't say that to go up, and I don't judge anybody by that either in our culture. I don't really. I mean, it's nice. I appreciate it. So it's really an interesting response to learning and growth. Now, I would also say what's interesting. I've heard this story both from people working with people, and I want to always be careful culturally in these conversations because I never want to offend anybody or say anything that's incorrect. When I've worked with people in India, that there's a tendency, I won't tell you if I don't understand something, I'm probably not going to tell you I don't understand. They won't tell you they don't understand it till maybe it's a little too late because they want to prove that they know how to do it and understand it. And so I know there was some tension in terms of sometimes work getting done or not getting done. It's like, well, if you would have told me a week ago, I could have helped you. But instead it's almost like they tell you too late because they don't want to show that they don't know how to do it.
There's a sense of pride.
I get maybe there's part of that. Yeah, there's part of that. So I've seen a little bit of that shows up as well. So those are a couple of anecdotes maybe that I can experience with that. I find the core of human beings are often very much the same. I try to look to what do we have the same that's really really similar when I'm working with different cultures. We have things we love to do, families we have, and passions and work we want to do. We want to do a good job. Most people want to do a good job in the work that they're compelled to do. And so I always look for what can I find that's common to to people.
I remember
Kind of focused on that.
I was in California once,
Yeah.
and I was driving. I don't know. I don't know where it was. Some truck stop somewhere in the middle of nowhere. It's boiling hot.
Yeah.
Walk in there, and I'm amazed that there's air conditioning, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing, heaven. And I was just standing watching the store attendant and this guy talking,
Yeah.
and I don't know, and this will sound strange, I know, but I was just marveled at the fact that they were having such a just normal, straightforward conversation about just,
Yeah.
oh, how's wife, how's kids, like what's going on, da, 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 da.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just talking then reminded me of that, like the basic kind of things that most humans are
Yeah.
care about, like the core things are normally the same. Like, yeah, it will differ in country to country. We've got very different um things that we're dealing with, circumstances,
Sure.
obstacles,
Yeah. Yeah.
etc. But
Yeah.
the fundamentals are normally always the same, and it's
Yeah.
just intriguing,
Yeah, I got to work with a group. I got to actually reminded me of a story. I got to work with a group of people that had come to the United States, but they were from the Middle East, several different countries. I can't remember the exact ones, but I think it was like Egypt and Iran and Afghanistan. I mean, several different of these Middle East countries. There's a lot of tension, as we
Mm.
know, in there. And so I get to work with these folks for, I think, a half day, doing some team building activities and some exercise and having some great conversations, having some fun with them, but also learning a little bit. And towards the end of the conversation or time together, I said, "Hey, what's important to you?" I just simply asked that question, "What's important to you?" And it was like across the board: family, work, faith, community. I mean, I was like, okay, that tells you a whole lot about, and every one of them could pretty much say the exact same. I was like, oh, that I can get those four things. That I can relate on all those levels really, really easily. Now I might communicate a little differently than you, and I might have different values or different beliefs than you, and how those all play out. But the core of it, those are some common connections that we can make with each other.
When you deal with situations, because you must come across this, where there are within groups,
Yeah.
maybe people that are clashing, people, big personalities, people having difficulties with each other, or maybe people, let's say, either cynical or just not
Yeah.
receptive to the leadership that has either been already given, or that is being outlined in these programs.
Yeah.
How do you approach that, and what have you experienced?
Wow. Depends on how extreme those behaviors are showing up. So I've done workshops where we're doing leadership development training. I've got some fairly cynical people. Imagine it's a cynical person in the workshop. Usually it comes across as passive aggressive. And there's usually comes to passive aggressive and sometimes some humor, but it's derogatory to what we're talking about. And then it disrupts the entire group. All right. So I've seen that happen before with a few individuals. And how do you navigate that as a facilitator of a learning experience where I'm trying to get people to have the most value in that experience?
Is there any
Yeah.
is there any particular instances that stand out, and like how did you
Yeah.
handle them?
Well, one of them standing out to me very clearly. And first of all, you try to be kind and generous and encourage people to come back and connect with that. That's usually my first approach. So I never want to put anybody on the spot. I don't want to call anybody out. I don't want to do that. But what I also see is if I set really good expectations at the beginning of the session, I can usually keep those at bay. And if I can get people to invest in relationship with one another, I can keep some of those passive aggressive behaviors maybe not to show up as much. But if they continue to show up, I'll take a break and I'll just walk up to them and say, "Hey, it seems like you don't want to be here. It's okay. It's okay if you're not here." I mean, seriously, it's like
no, you're right. You're right. That's just...
I'm like, it's challenge by choice in my world, man. And I
Mm.
know he might be compelled, like his manager maybe told him to be here, but I'm like, hey, that's your choice. It appears that you don't want to be here. You don't have to be here. And just being matter of fact, I'm not being negative. It's like, this is what I see. And sometimes that'll change. That'll, just address it directly. But it's one-on-one. It's to the side. I'm not doing that in front of anybody.
Yeah, I get
that those are extreme cases where there's a handful of times I've had to have that kind of direct conversation with individuals. And usually at the beginning of the session, I'll say, if I feel like there's a sense of people don't want to be there, I'll just say, you don't have to be here. Right? I'm not forcing you to be here. It's challenge by choice. If you want to leave, leave. I like that, but that's the reality of life. Like if I want to be in a certain, you have the choice. Now there's consequences to those choices. Like if I'm an employee and my manager says you need to go attend this training and I choose not to attend that training, there's consequences possibly for that. But it's like I don't need to manage your, I don't need to force you to be here.
It's interesting
So
how people like act in these situations as well. Like
yeah.
I never forget when I was about 18, I did. Wow, I don't know if I've ever told the story. So
Okay.
I trained to be a steward.
Oh,
I never actually did it, but I got the
yeah,
training.
nice.
And I was fresh out of school. I was kind of just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I wasn't going to university just yet. So I was
Yeah.
kind of just like there. I don't know. It was an opportunity. I went and I took it seriously. Fresh out of education, but I still took it seriously. But I was amazed at, firstly, just the mix of people. It was interesting to be in a sort of a classroom style setting with a room full of, 20, 30, 40, 50-year olds.
Okay.
And here I am, 18. I was the youngest in the room by far.
Great. Yeah.
And there was a really uncomfortable situation where two gentlemen to the left of the room were, I don't know what they were doing. Were they singing, mucking around, telling jokes, something? They're just distracted,
Right. Right.
disruptors. Sorry. And the instructor had to make a point of saying like, "Hey, listen, stop doing that." Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he made a point of saying like, "You, we're all adults here. Like, this
Uh,
is you don't need to be doing this." And then there was this kind of like air of awkwardness in the room
yeah. Oh
as
yeah.
we're all just like, because like, I could get away if that was me. I could get away with that at that age because I was 18. I mean, it still wouldn't have been acceptable, but it would be
Right.
like, oh,
Right.
he's young, he's being silly, right? But this was like a guy in his like mid 30s, and it's like, oh, like, and I imagine many of those instances that you spoke about are similar to that sometimes, where
Yeah.
it might just be a lack of maturity, and then it's like,
Yeah.
how do you approach that? You know?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, I don't. With the adults, I usually don't have as there's not as many of those challenges within the things that I do. I don't have that, but they can show up. Usually, it's gonna work. I don't work with kids as much anymore, but the kids, those behaviors show up, and you have to address them directly and help them navigate that. That's just maturity, right? That's just growing up in that. So
What would you say
yeah.
are the biggest takeaways, lessons from studying leadership that you've learned?
Yeah, that's good. I have to pause it. There's tons of them, man. Wow. Uh,
I love it when this happens.
Yeah, no, because there's so many things that are going through my mind, and we asked that what are the biggest, most important things, and this it goes back to relationships.
Okay.
Leadership, if it truly is, we're talking about leadership, it is about a relationship with other people. It isn't me just managing stuff and moving stuff and getting people to do stuff. It's about engaging in a relationship with individuals. Now, in that relationship, I have to consider like vision. Like I think I have to consider future state. What's the future state that I'm helping people move towards in that relationship? What am I helping you move towards in that relationship? How am I helping myself move towards that direction? And is there a way we can do that together, right? And in that relationship. So part of that is like, where are we going, right, in that relationship? I also have to think about, in that relationship, I have to think about how am I helping grow and develop the other person or myself in that relationship. I mean, it can be mutually beneficial. How can we help grow and develop in that relationship as well? So we have to have what's the future that we're moving towards, and how's that relationship compel us to that? How do we help grow and develop in that relationship and what we're trying to learn how to do and accomplish? I think that's really important. And then I think there's also just stability. How do you create stability in a relationship so that you function well? And so there's some consistency. If I know and understand and I know there's some sense of like I know you're going to treat me well and I'm going to treat you well, and we have certain ways that we interact together, and I'm not going to be surprised by those and too much. I mean, we may be surprised sometimes, but and if I hurt you and you hurt me somehow, which will happen, how do we navigate that conversation? All right, and it's going to happen in every relationship. At some point, there's going to be some tension or some hurt that's going to happen. How do I navigate that? So to me, it goes back to how do I continue to nurture, develop, and uphold those relationships the best that I can in whatever endeavor what I'm working on as well. And at some points, that relationship might mean I have to let you go do something else, or you have to let me go do something else, because that's beneficial for both of us as well. And that's hard. So I'd say it comes back to that. I don't know if that's rocket science or anything else, but if it comes back to leadership as a relationship, and then you put that in the context of all the other components, I think people will be more successful in that, how they influence others.
Great stuff.
There you
Couple
go.
of final questions for you,
Sure.
completely unrelated to leadership.
All right, let's do it.
What is happiness to you?
Man.
Going deep.
Yeah, going deep, man. I'll give you my Christian answer. You are Christian, but this is as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, it's glorifying God, worshiping God. I mean, that brings me joy when I see that happening. And oftentimes for me, that's in music. Like I love music, either playing, writing, singing. So there's like a complete place of happiness or joy, I'd say, in that when those two things are merging together for me, that's a happy, joyful place.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
I would go back to my grandfather. So I'll give you a little bit of story that sets this up. So my grandfather lived in southern Iowa, a little rural area. My grandmother had passed away at this point. Lived kind of in a farming kind of area, but not a farm necessarily. And I'd hear, it's about 2 hours from where I live. And so I'd heard he wasn't doing well. So I thought I'm going to drive up and see him. Um, and so I'm in my car driving up there, thinking about what am I expecting to see my grandfather when I get there. And I'm thinking he's probably going to be laying in bed, you know, probably not doing a whole lot. I drive back through the gravel roads and up to the road where he's living, and he's out on his lawnmower, mowing the lawn. And I'm like, I get out of the car, I literally go, Granddad, what are you doing? And these are the words he told me. He said, if you're gonna live, you gotta be living. And that day, he could get on his lawnmower at 90 some years old and mow his lawn. If you're gonna live, you gotta be living. And that was what he could do that day, is go mow his lawn. I was like, that's really good advice. If I'm gonna live, I gotta be living. So there you go. I'd say that's probably one of the best advice I've ever got. So, whatever you can do that day to live, go live and live it well.
Amazing. What's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
Man, these are good ones. These are good. You got some good ones. Biggest life lessons. I'm trying to think of the big life lessons. Okay, I'll give you this one. That I think is a constant. I'm constantly learning this one. Um, is forgiveness.
Mm.
Like how to be forgiven and to forgive. Because all unforgiveness does is just eat at you and tear you up. And yeah, and whether you're holding that towards somebody else or somebody's holding that towards you, or how you're experiencing that, I'd say yeah, and that's something that we don't. Yeah, anyway, I'd say that's yeah. How do we continue to live that out? And if I'm holding unforgiveness towards somebody, how do I find forgiveness? Or if that's towards me, how do I reach out and try to find forgiveness in that relationship? So yeah, I would say that'd be the lesson right there, man. If I picked one.
I think it's a great one. Yeah, I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that not just forgiveness, but a lot of things in life, like when you when you learn to kind of just let go of certain things,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a physical weight has just been lifted off your shoulders. That's what I
That's
feel
good.
forgiveness is like. It's like
Yeah.
it's like if you are the one forgiving someone, you
Yep.
might feel feelings of anger and hatred towards that person, but when you forgive them, I guarantee you will feel better.
Yep.
And I think it's because of this like idea of maybe being more than we are,
Yep.
or better than we are, or
Mm-hmm.
better than we think we can be, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Good.
So it's
Nice.
been, yeah, no, I've had a great time talking with you, learning about everything that you're involved with when it comes to leadership and just in general. Um, Massive thank you for appearing on the show. Do you have any upcoming thoughts or sorry, upcoming projects or final
Yeah.
thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do a little bit of self promotion. I'm not huge on self promotion, but if people I know if are listening to this need support in terms of their leadership development, I'd love to have those conversations. I love helping people think through that, whether it's in their organizations or one-on-one and coaching relationships. And now with our great world, we can communicate with people all across the world, which is fantastic. So yeah, people feel free to reach out to me. LEAD, letter K, letter C.com. Lead KC is my website address. You can reach through that. LinkedIn, I'm out there. Todd Long, Leadership Innovations. You can connect with me on that. And so I just offer that up. People are listening to this and want to reach out and connect and have conversations and want to think about this some more. I'm very happy. I love to do that. I love to have those conversations. So thank you so much for letting me be on the show and asking great questions and listening well and telling your stories, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Massive pleasure to have you on the show, and I look forward to the next time that we talk.
Yeah, and may I give you some encouragement since you don't get a lot of praise. You said that earlier. You have a great voice. You're very articulate. You have great open-ended questions, and you're doing a fantastic job.
So I'll say I definitely get a lot of praise now, and I'll have to just say that now because as soon as you said that, I know there'll be people that'll be like, "Hang on, I tell him all the time." I get a lot of praise and support, and I'm very thankful. And thank you for that compliment. Thank you to everyone
Yes.
that's always really supportive and lovely. But what I was talking about was earlier when I was a lot younger, and also
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the workplace as well. Like I think that,
yeah,
but I think it extends to all areas of life. You need constant reassurance,
yeah.
positive reinforcement. Even just the little things, being told like, "Oh, well done for making dinner." I don't know, like, well done.
Yep, yep,
It's nice
absolutely.
to hear. It makes you feel better. It keeps you going, keeps you motivated.
Well done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a great day.
And to all the listeners of the Christian Reeve Podcast, as always, thank you for listening. Be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.